episode 77 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hi, Catherine!
Hey, Kristen!
So it's week 3 of AKOFAF, and we are... Yeah, I'm calling it AKOFAF. I'm starting it. It's a thing. I'm just doing it.
Cool.
So obviously we are starting off with another Would You Rather. This one, is actually quite hard, and I don't know what we're gonna say about it. So would you rather always have to read in the dark, or always have to read tiny print? What would you rather?
There has to be some, what does dark even mean if you can still read? Obviously it's going to be hard, but I feel like tiny print is more doable than darkness. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I can't imagine, with the tiny bit of light, you can read. It is hard. You're straining your eyes, which kind of reminds me, tiny print is the same kind of thing. You're going to end up with a headache. But I just feel like tiny print, I'd have to choose tiny print. Because worst case, I just get a magnifying glass.
Okay, so here's my issue. Okay. Are you allowed aids? If you always have to read tiny print, are you allowed a magnifying glass? If you always have to read in the dark, are you allowed a flashlight? I feel like those are the big issues. If you're allowed an aid,
yes,
I think I would rather read in the dark than read the tiny print.
Yeah, I guess a flashlight seems more like cheating than a magnifying glass does to me.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know why. There are no rules.
No. Yeah, no.
Interesting.
Yeah. So...
I guess the other thing, too, is it depends what you're reading. Because, if I'm reading on my phone, I don't give a fuck I don't give a fuck if it's dark.
It's true. It has your own light source.
And then if it's tiny print, you can just go zoom, zoom.
That's true.
It fixes all problems. I'm just going to read on my phone.
But you would not be able to give up physical books.
No, I wouldn't. That's true. I feel like it'd be harder to find tiny print books. So would that factor into it? Or is it just you can only have regular books if it's dark? So this one's just so
Yeah, no, see, when I'm thinking of it, I'm thinking, okay, well, if we're talking about in this mythical alternate universe where we could only have one or the other, I'm thinking that everything is going to be available in tiny print. Yeah.
It would have to be.
Right? Everything. You either pick regular print or tiny print.
Foolish. Yeah, I agree.
I agree with you, though. If I'm not allowed using an aid, I think I'd rather tiny print. Depending on how tiny. If we're talking, unable to read with the naked eye, then we're just lost cause.
Yeah, then you just can't read.
I have terrible eyesight.
Mine's not too bad. I got it lasered. But that's the thing about the dark, too, is, if it's so dark you can't see... You just can't read anymore. There's no...
But at the same time, so, if it's dark, can you, open a window? And let the natural moonlight filter in?
Not the sun. We don't get sun here.
We literally just finished saying last week we had, a heat wave.
Yeah.
No sun for us!
It rained today, and my seasonal depression's no, you never get sun.
Meanwhile, I'm yay, rain!
Yeah. Yeah, see, this one's one of those ones where you almost need more parameters, and then you're like getting into what this world looks like, which is like way too much work for you know what I mean? Oh yeah. God. But yeah. I think I would have to choose tiny print, and I would probably just, but the only thing is if I decided to just read on my phone, I would prefer it to just be dark and have regular sized print on my phone. Yeah. Like, because if you have to zoom for each word and scroll.
And then you gotta, move through the page. Yeah, I think for me, if I'm allowed to use an aid, I'll pick the dark. If I'm not allowed anything, I'll pick tiny print.
Yes.
That's my answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Good times.
If anyone wants to give us their answer, let us know. What do you think? What would you rather?
And if you have any parameters of what this world would look like, include those in your answer, because that's what these always come down to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that, we're going short and sweet with that one. So, or not really, but we'll get right into it. Just a heads up, we are not a spoiler-free zone. And things getting saucy this week. They are.
Yeah. I can't really remember at the moment, but I'm sure they do.
No, they do.
I should know. I just finished these, but my brain just isn't working.
Oh, that's okay.
So this is our third week with AKOFAF. Sorry. I don't think I like it. And we're reading chapters 23 to 34. Last week, there was an attack, and Poppy was kidnapped, but that, of course, didn't last long, because she's a badass bitch. Mm-hmm. A full-grown tree just appeared as an omen, meaning change is coming, and the gods are watching.
Which is creepy.
Like, it is so creepy. Just
the gods are watching.
Leave
like,
us alone.
Are they watching me in the shower? Like, what are they watching?
Yeah. Yes. Everyone's kind of starting their journey to Spessa's end, and Poppy's group on their way was attacked, of course, because it's necessary, by the Dead Bones clan. They did arrive in Spessa's End at the end of last week, and Poppy woke up to an out-of-his-mind Casteel, who went down on her and then snapped out of it, said sorry, after commenting on the taste of her pussy. And just left her on the bed half naked with Kieran standing in the room.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot that's how it ended. Man. How did I forget that? Poppy's obviously super confused because people don't usually wake up completely out of their minds with black eyes and
also he just gave her like a mind-blowing orgasm too.
Like she was screaming from the orgasm, so it was good.
Yeah.
But Kieran's still in the room, which is kind of Akko. And he asks...
She's vagina out. Like, her vagina is
Casteel
out.
covered it before he said sorry and covered it with her robe.
Still, though.
It's so bad. Oh, God. So bad. Kieran asks if Casteel hurt her, but she says no. And he asks if Casteel forced himself on her, and she says no. And this is when she thinks, like, she could have stopped him at any time. Which I don't agree with. I'm glad that she feels that way, because it was iffy consent-wise, but she doesn't feel like she was taken advantage of, which is what matters.
Yes.
I just don't actually think she could have stopped him if he, like, what could she have done that an Atlantean, like, she'd have to stab him and then, like, cut off his head. Yeah. And he'd be dead. Yeah. So if you don't want to kill him, then I guess sex is okay. Like, I just don't know what she could have physically done. Like, I know she stabbed him in the heart before and that slowed him down, but I don't know. There's a lot. Yeah. And she kind of also thinks, like, she wanted it and he could smell it on her. Because, like, she did wake up and she was super horny. It just seems kind of like an over-explanation. And I guess we kind of do need it so that there's no tension about this moment. But it just felt like a bit clunky in the way that the author wrote it, I think. In, like, I don't know. The author's like, this isn't going to be a problem. This was completely consensual. And I'm like, I kind of feel like he could have an issue with it too, because he wasn't in his right state of mind either. Like, there's more consent things that are in this, and it just was weird for me. That's all I got. Yeah. Especially her over explaining that she's fine with it. I was just like, I don't really need this.
If you're actually fine with it, you don't really need to say too much. Just, it's fine.
Yeah. Anyway, we kind of had this conversation last week a tiny bit.
Yeah.
All she really thinks in the negative about it is that she kind of needs to stop, like, making out with him and having sex with him or doing sexual things with him, because she is going to fall in love with him if she keeps doing this, which is like,
too late, puppy.
It is too late, but you know what she's thinking. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah.
She does explain what happened to Kieran, that, like, Casteel woke up and was just out of his mind, and, like, he probably was startled when he woke up, and, like, then Casteel saw Kieran as a threat to her, and Casteel was protective over her in that moment because he, like,
it was his alpha maleness coming out to protect his woman.
Now. Yeah.
But, like, okay, here's my thing. Here's my question. Mm-hmm. So, the scene originally, like, he woke up out of his mind, and he originally had his hand on her throat and was, like, in an aggressive way at her.
Yes.
But then, in smelling her, changed course and decided sexual things were...
Yes.
So, like, if she was not turned on...
This is a good question.
Do we think that he could have gotten violent with her?
Yeah.
Instead of going the sexual route? Like, could he have treated her the way he treated Kieran?
Because, like, him and Kieran have a deeper bond than, like, they actually have a physical bond.
Yes.
I don't know if physical is the right word.
No.
It's not, because they're not actually attached.
No, but they have, like, a supernatural, like, actual bond between them.
Tether bond between them. So if he was willing to, if he was willing to actually attack Kieran, I think, so it's a good thing she woke up horny, I guess, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't really remember a whole lot, and I know we get into a concept this week that's kind of like mates. I forget what they're called.
Heartmates.
Heartmates. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I was thinking that, and I was like, it can't just be something mates, but it is. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if we ever get into, like, if that means much. Like, I know, like, I feel like some mates, like, you physically can't hurt each other. Like, you wouldn't be able to hurt them. Like, not in, I don't think that's a thing in lore.
with mates. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that's a thing in this book,
well,
but I don't know.
Well, yeah, so I guess what you're, like, I get where you're going. Like, how do you know when you're heartmates with someone? Because, like, in others, like, in SJM books, it's like a snap. Like, the male smells it and it's like, oh, you're my mate. And then it's like a tether, like a bond that snaps in place. Mm-hmm. Other ones, it usually always relies on smell, though. Like, in werewolf ones, oh, I smell you, you're my mate. Like, you know what I mean? So, I guess, it's, how do you know you're heartmates with someone? Are you just like, I'd give up my life for you, therefore you're my heartmate?
Yeah, and she doesn't have a sense of smell that would be able to more than likely smell something like that either.
Nope.
It's interesting. Many thoughts.
Yes. I don't, maybe, like, because they're all expecting her to go through the culling, right?
Yeah.
So maybe once she goes through the culling, maybe it'll show up then. Yeah.
I got confused with the culling and the joining just then in my brain. But now I know what's happening.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's just interesting. I don't know if he would have gotten violent with her if she wasn't horny. That's a very good question.
Thank you. Sometimes they exist.
I assume so, but then I also wonder if that might have snapped him out of it faster because she would have been fighting back. Yeah. But, like, she might have used her powers earlier, or she might have been like, hey, it's fucking me, you idiot. And, like, or if she started bleeding, would he have just started, like, lapping it up like a dog?
Maybe.
So, like, maybe it would have fixed all problems if he just got violent instead. Anyway. Poppy asks Kieran, obviously, what the hell that was, because Kieran did come in and say, I told you this was gonna happen, or something along that.
Not helpful, Kieran, to be fair.
Yeah. And, she, like, gets out of bed while she's asking this and, like, picks up her dagger, because she had it out against Casteel, but didn't use it. And Kieran is like, are you gonna stab me now? Like, what are you doing? She's like, no, not every time I pick up a dagger am I gonna stab somebody. But they kind of have, like, some cute back and forth banter. Mm-hmm. And it's, like, showing that they're developing a relationship as friends, too. And I like it. I like when the main female character actually becomes friends with the main male character's friends. She tells him that she could feel Casteel's hunger, and he's happy that she actually used her power on Cass to, like, be able to tell somewhat what's going on, because he had mentioned doing that before. He was like, you should use everything you can, kind of thing. And he kind of is, like, reminding her / us that Atlanteans need to feed on other Atlanteans' blood. So, like, if, I guess, she asks him then, like, is that why his eyes were black and he was possessive? And he says that, like, the black eyes are from hunger, but the possessiveness is likely because of the other morning activities they were doing. So the reason he was so possessive over her was absolutely him being like, she's mine, get away, Kieran.
Yeah.
She thinks back to the forest, so when they were attacked and Casteel came over to bind her arm, he was kind of weird for a bit, and she realizes that, like, he was kind of paralyzed by her blood and wanting it. Yes. That he, like, took too long to wrap up her arm, and she was like, she didn't realize at the time, but that's why he was so weird about it. Kieran says, which I don't understand this, but Kieran says he isn't, like, Casteel isn't too close to the edge right now, or he would have actually ripped Kieran's head off. And then, like, he probably would have also fed on Poppy uncontrollably, and she would have died, and then he would have probably ascended her. So, like, I guess he could have been worse. And I'm like, is this where we're going with this? That's what we're saying? This isn't that bad. It's fine. I'm like, I think this is pretty bad.
He can't control himself, and he has questionable consent issues, so that's fine.
I guess he could have been even more far gone that he just would have, like, started feeding off of her instead of smelling that she's horny. I'm like, yeah. It's an interesting take. I'm like, he's clearly not okay. Maybe we should get him some blood. Like, that's the basis here.
Yes, yeah. I wonder, like, so he has to feed from other Atlanteans, but, like, aren't Wolven technically Atlanteans?
I think so.
Could he not feed from Kieran?
I don't know. But, like, every time he feeds, not every time, it's only happened once, I think, with Poppy.
Twice?
So far.
Once? Yeah.
He's fed her twice, and she's fed him once.
Yeah, okay.
I think.
Yeah.
But she got super fucking horny. So, like, if he were to feed off of Kieran, would Kieran start getting super horny? And, like, I'd watch that scene.
Yeah. But I also think it depends, like, I think the Atlantean can control what the bite does to you, right? Because remember he says that, like, you can choose to make it painful or you could choose to make it not painful.
Yes.
So, like, could you choose to make it neutral?
I kind of doubt it. Or that's, like, that's some manipulative and cruel behavior. If he's choosing to make her uncontrollably horny when he bites her.
That's true.
So, I guess he could theoretically bite Kieran and make it painful. if that counts as Atlantean blood. But yeah. Interesting. Yeah. On shore.
We're getting really into the lore here. We're like
We're
deep diving.
We're not even past the first scene of this week, and we're like, let's dive in as far as fucking possible. Yes. So now we get to one of your favorite tropes. So he mentioned that, like, Kieran thinks that if, obviously, Casteel were to kill Poppy, he would bring her back as Ascended, even if it's illegal. Mm-hmm. Which makes Poppy think about, like, the Ascendeds are immortal, and then she thinks about how Casteel's immortal, and then she thinks about how she's mortal, and she's going to age and be old and gray, and Casteel's gonna be young, which is your favorite trope ever.
I hate it with the fire of 1,000 suns. I hate it so much.
So it's something that, like, obviously is gonna play on your mind if you're mortal and you're in love with somebody immortal. Like, it's obviously it's something, like, Bella in Twilight wasn't fucking wrong.
No!
She could have waited a few years more. She was a fucking teenager. Like, if I would rather be stuck in my 20s than my teens. Yeah. If I'm being, like, thinking of my timeline of life. But I do understand her freak out 100%, especially since Edward was, like,
17, 18
when he turned, which is
it reminds me actually of an episode of Supernatural where this dude was like from the Incan time. I feel like you'll definitely remember it when I talk about it. And I don't remember his name, but, like, he was a sports player.
Oh, no. Wait.
Yeah. No, yeah. Anyway, and then, like, he had to do sacrifices every so many years to keep his
and
immortality.
He's played by Logan from Veronica Mars.
Was he?
Yeah.
But he was dead.
Wait.
So, like, they see these ritualistic killings, and so then they go visit his mother, and she, like, talks about him, and then they sneak back into her house and, like, find, like, they shared a room and all this stuff, and it turns out he was immortal.
Oh.
But then he specifically died. He couldn't take it anymore. But she was his girlfriend from, like, the 40s and stayed his girlfriend. And after so many years, they had to stop portraying her as his girlfriend / wife and turn her into his mother, even though they were still together as, like, husband and wife.
Sorry. I was thinking of a different one where the guy time traveled. That guy is in Veronica Mars. he time travels and then he takes Dean back in time by accident because Dean, like, grabs onto him and then he goes back in time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Completely different episode. Yeah. I got confused.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I know what one you're talking about. That would be awful. Can you imagine portraying your lover's parent because you grew old and ugh.
So that's, like, same thing. She's already thinking about it. Like, and...
She's also 18. It's true. But I do get it. I get it.
I'd be thinking about it, even at the age I am. Not 18.
Yeah. It makes more sense at our age.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that is kind of something that is coming up, obviously, in this book for the first time, but it's something that's on her mind, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Kieran then tells her he doesn't want to talk about Cass when he isn't around, and that it's not really her business. She isn't his family or, like, a close friend. And, like, Kieran doesn't want to start, like, telling her things about Casteel without his approval. That's not really the right word, but without him knowing, I guess. But she realizes it's about his nightmares, and she says, like, she already knows that he gets nightmares that wake him up and he doesn't know where he is. And Kieran's kind of surprised that Casteel had told her that, but she's like, yeah, I get nightmares, so he told me.
Yeah.
Then. So Kieran tells her basically it especially happens if he's startled awake, which he was this morning because she was trying to get away from him. And it can kind of turn him back into the animal that they made him when he was taken by the Ascended. And she says he's not an animal and he's not a monster. And Kieran agrees and says, like, she would have liked him if she met him before all of this trauma happened to him, which is kind of a shitty thing to say. Like, I get it, but I'm like, she can never meet him before this trauma happened. Like, we're not going back in time, so, like, I don't know why. Like, yeah, I guess he can move past some of it and grow and, like, maybe get back some of who he used to be, but he still went through 50 years of intense trauma. Like, it's not just gonna... I don't know. It just seems like you're not gonna say anything bad about him while he's not around, but you're like, you would have liked him. He's much worse now. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. He's a terrible person now. He's better before.
It's just kind of weird. So yeah, Poppy asks Kieran why he hasn't fed with, like, so many Atlanteans around. Like, why hasn't he fed on anybody? And Kieran's basically like, that's a really good question. And you're like, obviously Kieran knows, but he's just like, not telling her. You're like, cool. I'm sure we'll get it some other way. Poppy is wondering now why, which is another issue I have with it all. But now she's wondering why she let Casteel go down on her. And, like, it's just like, why are we going back? She was like, cool, I don't feel any shame about this. It's all consensual. We're all good. And now she's like, why did I do that? And you're like, wait.
Yeah.
And I get people have dualities and you can think many things, but...
Well, yeah, I guess it's more of a wanting it in the moment and then afterwards being like, oh, I kind of regret doing that. You know what I mean? Like,
and it's like, I get her reasoning for not wanting to do it are because she's afraid she's going to fall in love with him or more in love, however she wants to word it. But yeah, it's just like, I don't know. It's something. So she comes out of, I guess she went to get dressed or something, and Kieran's waiting in her room, and she asks if he's, like, on babysitting duty. But he says he wanted to see if she wants to get breakfast with him. And she kind of asks if they should wait for Casteel to come back. But he says, like, Casteel will find them when he's ready. Like, he's clearly not ready yet. He needs some time.
Yeah.
And he asks her if she'd rather see the bay instead of breakfast, and she's like, yeah, that's so much better because I can't think about eating right now because
what a moron.
Casteel is whatever he is, and she's worried about him, so she can't eat.
Would not be me. I'd be like, no. Breakfast, yes, let's go.
Right? I'd be like, breakfast, coffee, then bay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Even take a breakfast with you. Have a walking breakfast.
Lovely.
Sounds so nice.
It does sound nice.
But no. Do you know what? This is something that I really dislike. And I understand. Maybe it's just the fact that I haven't been in too many situations where I've lost, like, I've been so nervous I haven't been able to eat. But, like, it's not often that I'm like, oh, I'm so worried I can't eat. I'm so nervous I can't eat. Like, no, you put food in front of me, I'll eat it. I don't often skip meals.
No. And, like, the only times I've ever felt like that have been, like really bad. Not like somebody just walked out and I'm a bit anxious about what's going on with them. Yeah. Like, or, like, you're super worried about something and, like, you want to throw up. You're so worried about it. Like, that kind of stuff. It's not, I don't know.
Yeah. This
doesn't seem like one of those instances to me. And I guess she has no idea what's going on. So that makes it even scarier, I guess.
But it also, it happens all the time in books.
Yes. Yeah.
And mostly with the females.
100%. And then they're so tiny.
Yeah.
That
they're wasting away.
The shirts and clothes don't fit them because they're so tiny.
They're swimming in them.
It's true.
It's not something I appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I just don't think it's necessary.
Yeah. Agreed.
So yeah, they go down to the bay and they talk about the weather, and she asks him if he was in Carcedonia, and he says it was too crowded there. And she asks, like, isn't Atlantia, like, basically the same? Like, isn't that your whole deal, that you're running out of land? And he says it's not that bad there yet, but it will be. Like, they'll soon have, I guess, towns or cities that are just as crowded.
And I guess the problem is everybody's immortal. So, like, nobody dies. Their mortality rate is, like, nothing.
Yes, exactly.
Compared to their birth rate.
I'm surprised that they're only having land issues now. Since, like, before the War of Two Kings, they ruled
yeah,
all the land. And now since they've been pushed back to a specific area, and you're like, I guess they've been rebuilding since then and, like, getting back to a population. But
they almost need, this is going to sound so bad, they almost need to have wars to keep the mortality rate at a decent level.
It's true. Yeah, what are you going to do? It's like people are talking about, this is a tangent that I'm going on, but people are talking about, like, living longer and stuff. And I'm like, if everyone starts living longer and people keep having children, like, this is not, there's too many people already. This is not a good plan.
Well, but, like, that's where we are in the world now. Like, with the advent of modern medicine, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that with the advent of modern medicine, people are living longer. Therefore, our mortality rate has decreased significantly. People are living longer lives, and therefore our population has skyrocketed in the past, like, 100 years.
Yeah. Is this book about us?
Parallels, people. Parallels.
Yeah. Apparently we're going to find many of them today. I don't know if we're just in a mood to find them, but, like, I don't know what is happening, but our tangents are already... we're already off the rails.
Yeah.
So she... they're down at the bay, and she thinks of the god who is in this bay, and it's rain. Yeah, I didn't write that down, but...
Like the weather.
Yes, like the weather. But she wonders about, like, starts thinking about him and like if he'll wake up. But Rain is apparently the god of common men and endings. I don't know if that means anything or if that ever comes up, but it was mentioned, so I figured I had to mention it.
Such a weird, like...
Yeah, but they're all weird when, like, you think of, like, angels and stuff, and, like, the angel of, like, I don't know. I had one. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and they're like, he's the angel of, like, travelers, which includes, like, sailors, and, like, he's the angel of... Who could it have been? I think it was like Raphael. Anyway, doesn't matter.
I don't know. Like, I think of, like, ancient Greek gods, like, Aphrodite. She's what, the goddess of love.
Yeah.
But not just love. The goddess of sexual love and beauty.
Yeah.
Or, like, the goddess of love and fertility. But, like, the things sort of go together, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, Demeter, the goddess of harvest. Like, what's her name? Athena.
There you go.
But, like, she is the... Remember, like, Annabelle in the movie, she's like, my mother is the goddess of what? Something in... Goddess of something in battle strategy.
Yeah.
But, like, so she's the goddess of war and practical reasoning, aka, I guess, battle. Wisdom and battle strategy, that's what. So, like, you know, but, like, they sort of go hand in hand. This does not feel like they go together.
So, I just found what I was trying to think of.
Oh.
And it is Raphael. So, the Archangel Raphael is the patron saint of the blind, of happy meetings, of nurses, of physicians, makes sense, and of travelers.
They also, none of those go together.
Right? Like,
pick a lane.
Happy meetings is my favorite. It's a meet cute. Raphael is the patron saint of meet cutes.
Yeah. Maybe he's trying to say that all common men will have an ending.
Oh, look at you, trying to make things make sense.
Trying so hard.
Maybe could it be foreshadowing that regular people aren't going to exist in the future? It's just going to be Atlanteans, Ascendeds, and, like, they're going to wipe out all the common people, and then all the Ascended would die? Is that how the Atlanteans are going to do it? They're just going to kill all the mortals? So
kill everybody. Kill the food source, and then you're good to go.
Yeah. Interesting. Anyway, that was another tangent.
We should do, like, a tally one day of how many tangents we go on in an episode.
Well, this episode, I think, is wilder than most. And I think the issue started with our would you rather question, because we just got off on that too much, and now here we are. So Poppy ends up taking off her shoes and walking in the sand because she thinks, like, it's been such a long time since she's actually walked physically in sand, which makes sense because she's probably not been allowed out. It's probably been since was with her actual real, maybe not real, I don't know anything, parents.
Yeah.
And Kieran tells her that Malik would also take his shoes off and walk in the sand.
Yeah, it's just nice to feel sand between your toes. Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think that, like, that's only a them thing,
no.
But it is a good segue into bringing him up, I guess.
Yeah.
She asks what he was like, and he tells her that, like, Malik was kind and generous, and he was a prankster, and he was the life and soul of the family, and Casteel used to be more, like, the more serious one out of the two, and he also apparently acts different around her than he does around anyone else. Like, Casteel acts differently around Poppy than he does around anyone
different
else.
How? Like, less serious, more prankstery?
Like, more jokingly and happy.
What? He's happy with her?
Wild.
I thought he despised her.
Right? Kieran then kind of says, like, even if Malik is alive now, he won't be what he used to be. And she asks if Kieran actually thinks he is alive. And he says, like, he has to be. The Ascendant wouldn't let a prize like that go. Like, they wouldn't let a prince die. Like, they don't need to use as much blood to make Ascendants if you have, like, a full-blood Atlantean, especially a prince. Like, it'd be stupid to let him die.
Yeah. Well, and, like, it hasn't been that long, has it? It's only been, like... I know, they didn't really tell us, I don't think. But, like... I feel like it's only been a few years, right?
Yeah, I can't Google it, because I don't want any spoilers for
I feel like it's only been 5 to 10 years, maybe? And...
I don't understand why we're giving up on him.
Yeah. But in fairness, I think around 10 years is I think it's around there.
I think it's been less than Casteel.
Yes.
But we've just given up on Malik and we're assuming he can't handle it, but Casteel came back and was fine.
Yeah.
Cool.
Why did we bring this up again?
Because
oh right, they wouldn't let a prince die.
Yes.
Right. So he's 10 years in, like, yeah, and I think I wish it was just a little bit more clear, like, because Poppy's like, oh, all ascensions are now tied to me for when I, like, go through the culling or for when I ascend. So, like, we're not 100% on whether or not, like, have there been any ascensions in the past little while? Like, do they even, because that's, I think, the biggest question is, if there haven't been any ascensions, then we can safely say that Malik is gonzo. But if they have still been ascending people, then he's obviously raring to go.
So, I don't remember when this is said, but I think it's later this week. There haven't been ascensions in a very long time, except for her brother. He was the last ascension, and there wasn't many before him either. And he only got ascended as one person, which is weird.
Yeah.
Like, but also, they obviously needed somebody to ascend him. But it didn't, I guess it could have been anyone with Atlantean blood, maybe?
Well, I mean, they must have been they had to have been able to find people to feed. Like, they need to feed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it's confusing.
Yeah.
She kind of thinks now, it kind of, like, goes into something that I think we talked about last week. Like, how are they actually going to enforce Ascendants stopping ascending other people?
Yeah.
Which is a big question we had last week, and I think she's kind of coming to this realization of, like, how do we physically do that?
Yeah.
Which is fair, because I don't know the answer. But Kieran kind of changes the subject then, and he tells her that him, Casteel, and Malik used to come to this town before it was ever, like, destroyed in the first place, and when people still lived there. And everyone used to come out to see the two princes. And apparently a young girl one day fell into the bay, and everyone just watched in horror because no mortal is, like, allowed to enter the bay because it's where a god lies. So it's, like, almost superstitious, but, like, religious superstitious, yeah. So it's not whatever you call that.
Yeah.
But, of course, Casteel just jumped right in and grabbed her, and then Kieran says, Malik and a friend, but he has a, like, awkward pause, forced water out of the child's lungs.
AKA,
so this kid...
like, CPR, mouth,
yeah.
Like...
Yeah. So, they saved this kid, even though it's not allowed. I don't know. But it kind of, like, a lot of people in this town, like, thought that they were either gods or like blessed by the gods because of that, because they were allowed to do it.
Yeah.
Which is just interesting. It'd be really hard. I would just want to go swimming in the bay, which I probably would already, like, as me as a person, I would have already been in the bay, and they would have been like, wait, no, you can't. And I'd be like, what?
Don't do that. You'll die.
Yeah, it would have been one of those things.
Yeah.
So Poppy then, out of nowhere, just asks Kieran if the friend was Shay. And he's just like, what? And then he's like, Alistair told you. And she's like, yeah. And he's kind of like, he shouldn't have, but I'm like, it's also his daughter. He's allowed to talk about his daughter.
Yeah.
Like,
considering, so obviously I'm coming from the viewpoint of already knowing, like, what happens. And we do find out, I believe, like, I think it might be either my part this week or my part next week.
Yeah.
We do find out more about Shay, but, like, I don't know. I just feel like he maybe, like, Alistair doesn't know everything.
Yeah.
So, like, obviously he's gonna talk about her because of what he knows about her and what he knows about the situation.
Yeah. And he just thinks that, like, she died a hero, almost. Like, so obviously, and, like, she and Casteel were in love. Like, that's how he sees it. Yeah. And then she died
tragically.
Yeah. I think we kind of know trying to rescue him.
Yeah.
Do we?
I don't know.
I think that's kind of, anyway, if we didn't, sorry, you'll find it out next week. But I feel like Alistair, like, wants to talk about his daughter, but he can't with Casteel because Casteel doesn't want to talk about it. Yeah. And it's hard for him because, like, when you lose somebody, you want to talk about them. And, like, obviously you'd think that Cass would be the person that would understand the most because he was in love with her. So it seems like, I'm not surprised that he talked about her. And I kind of feel like everyone being like, he shouldn't have said anything is, like, a dick move. If you're not gonna tell him the truth.
But at the same time, though, I do agree it was dickish of him in the way that he brought it up with her.
Oh, 100%.
Remember? It was like, oh, maybe that's why he likes you, because you're so much like her.
Yes. That was 100% dickish, but, like, Kieran doesn't know he brought it up maliciously.
No.
So I'm just, like, I don't see why Kieran's like, oh, he shouldn't have done that. When you're like, let it go. It's his daughter.
Yeah.
But yes, we, like, having read it, we're like, oh yeah, he did that because he's a dick. So, yeah. Yes. So, she tells him that it was Alistair that said it, and that he also said that Casteel was once engaged to her. Kieran kind of gets a bit fiery here and, like, a bit mad, and he tells her that it's, like, his advice to never bring her up to Cass. And he's like, this marriage is temporary, so there's no need for you to know about any of this and any of his background.
I actually, so, like, I love Kieran. I actually really dislike him in this particular moment.
I just don't understand.
Like, especially when he's about to say what he's about to say.
Exactly what exactly.
Why would you then say, oh, this marriage is temporary, you don't need to know anything about him, but then you're about to go into this big spiel about the whole heartmates thing? Like, I'm sorry.
It makes no sense.
It doesn't make sense. Like, why would you say that? Like, if anything, if you think they're heartmates, then you should be encouraging her to talk to him about stuff. And, like, regardless of, you know, Shay and, you know, what Alistair knows about her versus what Kieran knows about her versus what Cass knows about her, like, regardless of who she was in Casteel's life, if he thinks they are heartmates, should he not be encouraging her to ask him about his past. Like,
yeah,
regardless of what it is, like, she should know. Like, he knows everything about her past.
Yeah.
Like, she only has 18 years of past, and he knows everything there is to know, pretty much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he's got, what, like 500, 400 years of living. Like,
yeah.
Kieran should want them to share with each other if he thinks they are what they are.
Yes. It just, and like, to literally have these two conversations at the same time.
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
No.
Legit, like, none.
No.
And it's just, it's so odd.
And out of character.
Yes. And I'm like, he could easily have been like, hey, just a bit of advice. Be gentle about this situation. Please don't pry into it.
Yeah.
There's a lot more going on.
Then, yes.
I get, like, I can buy that he's angry in this moment at Shay. And he gets mad by mistake at Poppy. I'll buy that, I guess. But it's just such a, like, to be angry and then literally in 2 minutes have the conversation they have and then be like, you should admit that you have feelings for him. You just said it was temporary. What the fuck are you on?
Yeah.
Like, it's just so weird.
Yeah. Whiplash!
Yes, 100%. And so she kind of changes the subject because she's like, whoa, man, let's chill.
Yeah.
But she asks if Casteel will be okay. And Kieran says, like, he's gonna need to feed soon, and he likely hasn't fed since,
the last.
He says, I have Macedonia written down, but that's not right. Since he fed on her.
Yeah.
And she doesn't understand why, of course. And Kieran says, like, normally he can go longer without blood, but he was injured. Like, he took, like, 3 arrows to the back, and, like, that obviously takes blood to heal.
She also stabbed him in the heart.
Yeah.
So.
He bit her immediately after that, though, didn't he?
Yeah, but I don't think he fed enough. Like, he only fed her for, like, only fed off of her for, like, a couple seconds, so I don't think.
Yeah. So I guess that's probably what they mean, is, like, Macedonia was the last time, like, he actually had somebody that he, like, actually had a full feed off of.
Yeah.
Feed. Like a big old scarf. Kieran does say if he doesn't feed, she'll be in danger. Even if she is someone he cares about, which she's like, I'm clearly not someone he cares about, which is how we kind of get into our next conversation. But he says, like, if he didn't
care about her?
Yeah. If he didn't, sorry, I missed a word somewhere. My brain just stopped working. If Casteel didn't care about her, they would currently obviously be on their way to Carcedonia to bargain her off for Malik. So Casteel wouldn't risk angering all of his people and also his parents with somebody that they clearly hate, because we've talked about that a fair amount too, if he didn't care about her. And then he tells her, like, it's obvious that she cares about him, like, cares for him too. And you're like, this is 100% whiplash. And Kieran says that's why she didn't stab him this morning, and, like, why she wants to know more about Shay. And Poppy starts to feel like it's a bit too intense to, like, acknowledge her emotions, and she's, like, doesn't want to, which has kind of been, like, a back and forth thing. And, like, it seems kind of silly, but you're also, like, she's 18 or 19 and has never felt love before or any of this in her life, so I can kind of forgive her.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But she does realize, like, she's already starting to fall in love with him, and she's like, there's no way he feels as strongly about her, because his people hate her and she's only mortal and she's gonna get old and gray and die.
And on their way to Spessa's end, he said, she was like, I'm linked to the Ascended. And then he's like, I would do anything for my brother. AKA, I'd get close to you, even though I find you deplorable.
Yeah.
Like,
you'd think that would be in her mind more than it is.
Yes,
because
that is still in my mind.
That is something that, like, she's like, oh no, everybody hates me because of my new powers. And I'm like, no, you should be more worried that he hates you and is only doing this, like, yeah.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, so she tells Kieran that she decided she can no longer be the maiden before she found out who Casteel was. And he made her feel alive and want life and, like, want to live outside of just being the maiden, which I think is giving him a bit too much, like, credit. Like, I know I guess it's just kind of worded weirdly.
Oh my god, okay.
Because, like, I feel like she always knew she didn't want to be the maiden. It wasn't like she was like, oh, I can be a different person outside of this. Like, she snuck out before she knew him. She went to the Red Pearl before she knew him. Yeah. So, like, I feel like she's giving him a bit too much credit here, even though she's not giving him, like, all of the credit either.
Yeah.
But she's like, she had decided, I guess, basically the night that they had sex, that she physically was no longer going to be the maiden. Because she had sex. But, like, that night she was like, when I end up at the capital, I'm going to beg the queen to, like, not make me ascend, basically.
Yeah.
Was kind of what she was saying. So, like, I guess before that, she'd never really accepted it, but she was kind of just going along with the motions because she couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
I guess. But yeah, it's just an interesting way to put it. But she's just kind of saying that, like, she doesn't hate him as much as she has been saying. Like, because, like, he betrayed her, yes, and all this shit. It's, like, not great times, whatever. But she's kind of getting over it, I guess, is what she's thinking.
Yeah.
Moving past it.
Yeah. Or, like, at least understanding why he did what he did.
Yes, yeah. But she says, like, caring for him can only lead to heartache. But Kieran says it doesn't have to, but even if it does end in heartache, like, that can be fine. Like, loving somebody and having that experience can be worth it, even with a goodbye that is, like, devastating. And I'm like, sounds like terrible advice.
Yeah.
And it's also, like, not helping her in this moment, I don't think, at all. But she says it sounds like he's had experience, and he agrees that he does, which is interesting.
Yeah. So I'm on my reread of book 3. Is it Gilded Crown of Gilded Bones, I think?
Sure.
And I just read about this.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it comes back up, because I was like, who are we talking about?
Yeah, no, I literally...
I completely forgot that this...
yeah.
Like, my first read, I completely forgot that this had happened.
It's on, like, page 450.
450?
Yeah.
Jesus, you're powering through that book.
Well, yeah.
Fair. Yeah, so Kieran asks her then if she knows what happens when an Atlantean cares for someone. And it's kind of like, you think he's going to get into the sex talk, not really, but it's just like, when two people love each other very much. But he says they find the idea of feeding off of someone else repellent. Like, it's too intimate. And if they have a mortal partner, their mortal partner kind of needs to prove that it's okay to feed off of them. And that's likely why Casteel hasn't fed yet. You're like, makes sense. Kieran then comments that Cass said that he felt like he knew Poppy after just a few conversations, and Casteel told her that he thought it was like his blood recognizing her Atlantean blood, and like she felt that same kind of recognition thing too shortly after. But Kieran thinks, I quote, it's something deeper than that, something intangible, far rarer and stronger than bloodlines and even the gods, something powerful enough that it has ushered in great change in the past. Which is just an interesting quote. But then he says that he thinks that they're heartmates. So heartmates sound a lot like mates. Super rare.
We're not gonna get into that again.
No, and like, I guess I haven't heard of any other heartmates, so maybe it is super rare. Maybe I'll leave it at that. But yeah, so it's just interesting. So like, it sounds similar to mates that we've heard of in other books. Like he thinks that they're meant for each other, like their blood is calling to each other type of thing.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And obviously Poppy has never heard of heartmates, and we just don't really get any more info on it other than that one quote. And Poppy is just like, doesn't really want to process it all. Like it's hard enough thinking about her feelings without adding in the fact that they could be like mated with each other.
Yeah.
Poppy's like trying to just focus on like her biggest issue now is Casteel feeding, and she knows it'll have to be from her. And if they want like people to believe that they're together, obviously they won't believe it if he's feeding off of somebody else. So I guess they finally go to breakfast, her and Kieran, and Quentin is there, and he says he's not looking forward to traveling through the mountains, and Kieran agrees, and Poppy asks about them. It's the is it the Skotos Mountains?
Yes.
Mountains?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And apparently the mist is so crazy there that like you can't even see like a hand in front of your face, which sounds kind of crazy. And like there's Atlantean magic around there to ward off travelers, and like the mist is kind of to make them think that it's Craven in the woods. And the magic is apparently tied to the gods, and like the mist reacts to people differently depending on like who you are. So they kind of travel in small groups to try to like make it not so bad.
Yeah.
Less people to react to kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're only apparently like a half day's ride from the woods, and then it just takes like a night to get through the woods or something. Like they're really not as far from Atlantia as I thought they were. People show up in the hall, and they all steer clear of Poppy, of course, and she can just feel their disgust and their distrust. And she asks Kieran where Casteel is because she's worried about him. And then she asks if Casteel was telling the truth when he said that, like, if she didn't want to agree to get married, he would let her go. And he says that he was telling the truth, but he doubts that she would ever be free of him entirely, even if he would have let her go. Like, clearly he thinks that Casteel loves her. And you're like, it's his best friend.
Yeah. And
he probably knows.
And they're bonded. Like, he can read his emotions a little bit. So, like, I feel like he can
that's true.
tell what he's feeling. Like, why can't you just, like, come out, instead of being cryptic, just come out and say, by the way, I can tell through the bond he actually has feelings for you.
That is a very good point. Yeah.
Would save so many pages.
Yeah. Interesting. But yeah, so Poppy then makes up her mind that she's going to offer herself as dinner to Casteel. I didn't need that line in my life, but
I kind of loved it.
Fair enough. So she ends up going back to her room, and while she's in her room, Alistair just shows up to talk to her, which is just kind of weird. It's just so weird. It's all weird. But he says he's there to talk about to like ask her about the attack with the
Lord Cheney.
Dead bones men.
Oh, that one.
With the dead bones men.
Okay.
Yeah. Too many attacks.
So many attacks.
There literally were. And he says he thought that they were all dead, which is kind of interesting. And they talk a bit about Spessa's end in general, and she's kind of saying that she's shocked at like how many people are here and like all this shit. And he says like he's surprised Casteel didn't tell her all about it because it was his idea to take over this land. And then he says, she's like, oh, he just must not have had time. And he was like, I'm sure it has nothing to do with trust or inattentiveness. And you're like, oh, he's trying to like
reverse psychology shit.
100%. But also like that is unfortunate that he didn't bring it up. Like he should have told her. She should also be able to act better.
But like also he's being a dick.
Oh, 100%. And then like this next part is just completely unnecessary, but he brings up Casteel needing to feed. And he also brings up something called the joining. Since she isn't familiar with Atlantean customs, like, he's trying to be nice and tell her about these things.
Yes.
But she obviously is like, I know about the blood, but what is the joining? But he's like, it's not his place to tell her. Like, you just brought it up.
Yeah.
Like, who are we here? Hagrid? Like, you can't just say something and then try to take it back. I shouldn't have said that. Like, fuck off.
Yeah.
So she obviously gets him to tell her about the joining, and he says it's an old tradition, and it's not done often, but if a bonded elemental, so Casteel, takes a partner, the bond that he has with his woven can be extended to her. So, that would mean that she would live as like if they did the joining, her, Casteel, and Kieran did the joining together, then she would live as long as a woven. So they're like immortal-ish. They're not quite as immortal as the elemental bloodline, but like they live longer than mortals.
Yeah.
But if she were to die and they had done the joining, then Kieran would die.
Yes. So
it's not all good.
If Kieran dies, would she then die too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Their lives are tied together.
Right.
Yeah, so it's interesting. But he says it's a blood exchange, and it can become intimate in a way that would make her uncomfortable. So sex.
Okay. Nice threesome.
Yeah, which is just... It's just funny, but it's also like... I obviously didn't finish the third book, but a lot of people, kind of rightfully so, expected a threesome in the third book after reading this book.
Right.
Because, like, it kind of implies it heavily that they're all going to get together.
Well, it's brought up several times. Like, she focuses, she, like, has a hyper fixation on this joining, like...
Yeah. And, like, I assume part of it, too, is that, like, she won't get old and gray.
Yeah, it would solve one of the issues.
That's a big... Yeah. But also, she does think about the sex part of it a lot after this conversation.
Yeah.
A lot.
A lot.
And like, so it's just something that people expected of the author after this book. She kind of thinks in her head that the reason Casteel didn't tell her about the joining is because he didn't think that they would be together long enough, so there's no need for her to be bonded with...
She honestly needs to stop jumping to conclusions.
Yes. 100%.
Like, give it up.
Yeah. Alistair then says, like, Casteel wouldn't expect her to do it. It's, like, archaic. Like, people don't really do it anymore. But she asks if the Wolven would expect her to do it. And then she asks if Shay would do it. And I'm like, oh, this is so awkward.
But, like,
why are you doing this?
It also, like, so I think that the joining has a much larger, like, looking for ritualistic significance. Like, the side effects of the joining, yes, her life would then be tied to Kieran and Kieran to her and whatever, and it just makes a strong bond amongst the three of them. but I think, like, just people see it in terms of, especially the rulers and, like, the royal family, they see it as, like, a ritual that is done to strengthen the crown, we'll say.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, she is asking, like, do the Wolven expect it? Like, as in, so, you know, the Wolven as a people, is this something that they need from the crown?
Yes.
Like,
especially since she's mortal.
Yeah.
Like, her life is short.
Yeah. But, like, would Shay have done it? Well, in terms of lifespan, Shay didn't need to do it, right? Her lifespan is as long as Kieran's. But, like, in terms of, like, having it has like a significance, just like, you know, a symbolic significance, right? In addition to what it would do for her, symbolically it means more. Yes. So, like, she's saying, like, would the Wolven expect it? Like, do they expect it of the crown to do?
Yeah. Yes.
And, like, in fairness, I actually think that's a really valid question, because if she were to ask Casteel that, I feel like he would be very like, oh, who cares what they expect? Like, it doesn't matter. All it matters is what we do and what, like, I do and what you do and how we feel. And it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks or feels, blah, blah, blah. But I do think that it's a valid question. Like,
yes. I think bringing Shay into it is a bit cringy.
Agreed.
And so does she. She's like, and then a stupid thing came out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And you're like, yes, that's...
100%. But I do think, like, knowing where, like, this sort of ritual stands in importance for an entire group of people, you know what I mean? Like...
Yes, it's a good question, and I think she does need the answer from somebody that isn't Casteel. But I also think, like, it shouldn't be... Alistair, because he's also manipulating her, which is evident by his answer to the question, which he doesn't even answer. Like, he doesn't answer if the Wolven, really. He just says, like, he just kind of says, like, Shay would do anything for Casteel, and she never backed down from anything. And you're like, that's part of the answer? And it's also, like, manipulative and untrue. Yeah. We'll find out next week or later this week. So, like, it's interesting. She then asks, she's like, they're really getting into it. And I know it's her thing. She asks questions. But she asks why King Malak ascended his mistress instead of doing the joining. And it's just such an interesting question.
Again, he was married. Like...
Yeah, you like, can't just...
I'm just gonna do this joining with my mistress over here, wife. You're okay with that, right? Okay, bye!
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah. It's so weird. And obviously, Alistair's like...
Well, sorry, but, like, also, if it is a ritual significance and a symbolic significance of having, like, this bond between, like, the king, like, the crown... pair and one of their Wolvens, why did he not do the joining with the queen?
Yeah. Did he, though?
He didn't. No. But I'm just saying, like, if what Alistair is saying is that, like, you know, it's a ritual, it's a symbolic thing, like, it signifies this bond between the three of them, and, like, you know, and she's like, well, is it expected of the royal pair to do it? And he's sort of it was a non-answer, but, like, if it was expected, would it not have been expected between King Malak, his bonded, because he was bonded to a Wolven, and the queen?
So, I guess the issue is, because I'm going to jump ahead a tiny bit, but Alistair was King Malak's bonded when he died, but King Malak had multiple bonded Wolven because he lived so long, and the Wolven don't live as long.
Right.
So if the queen is also Atlantean, why would she ever do the joining? if it would cut her life short when the Wolven died.
Good point. But that's what I mean. Like, why is this joining then important? If the queen didn't have to do it, why is it important then? Like, why bring it up at all? Why is it important for Casteel to do it?
Yeah. And he even brings up, like, if there's 2 elemental Atlanteans and they're both bonded, they can do the joining with all 4 of them. And I don't, like, does that mean, like, if one of these 4 people die, they all die? Like, what happens?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. It's getting tangly.
So it is getting tangly. And, like, all that to say, it's just something that he wanted to bring up to scare her off.
Yeah.
Like, he's just being a dick.
Yes.
He only brought it up because he's like, you're the maiden, and this is about sex. And it's not.
No.
Like, we get later, it's not even about that. But it's just, it's weird. But anyway, yeah, so she asks why Malik didn't do the joining with his mistress. Obviously, it would have been a super insult to the queen. And that's when he says he was the king's last Wolven, and he's actually the one who alerted the queen that Malik had ascended his mistress, and doing that shattered an unbreakable oath that he had with King Malik, and like severed their bondedness because he betrayed him, basically. Yeah. Obviously, it was for the greater good, but just a thing. Poppy's kind of thinking about it all after, like, everything she learned, but she's very focused on, like, how a threesome would work. And she's like, Kieran's attractive, but I think it would be weird to have 2 guys. And then she thinks about, like,
the diary.
The diary. And it's just like, oh my God. It's a focus. It's a focus. Mm-hmm. She also thinks about Shay, and she wonders how Casteel acted around her, and like if he acted like more of himself around her, because she feels like he has masks on all the time, which is obviously true. Like, he portrays himself differently for different people, and she feels like he isn't his true self with her, which I think he is, but she just doesn't know.
Yeah. And
she's obviously going to compare herself to this person that she, like, this to her is someone who's like angelic on a pedestal. Like, she's never going to get that level, and that's kind of what Alistair wants her to think. Casteel comes back to the room, and he apologizes for losing control, which is good. And he says it'll never happen again. And you're like, how can you say that? You can't say that. But then she jumps to a completely different conversation, and she asks him why he insists that no one call her the maiden. And he tells her that he doesn't want people to associate her with the Ascendeds, and they'll be less likely to hurt her if they think of her as Poppy instead of the maiden. Yeah. Which is not really probably what she wants to hear.
No, like, yeah. It's, dude!
You keep saying the wrong things. Yeah. I know you mean well. So she opens her senses to him, and she immediately feels his hunger, and then she feels a heavy feeling too. And then she tells him that Alistair told her about the joining, and that, like, makes Casteel, like, burst into laughter. And he guesses that Alistair called it crude and disgusting, but Poppy's kind of just annoyed that he didn't tell her himself, and he says, like, no one will expect it of them. It's a big ask of the Wolven, too. Like, Kieran would have to agree with it. Like, there's so much to it. Like, it's not something that they'll expect. But he also says, like, it doesn't always end in sex. That's just, like, what can happen with consenting adults if they wanted to. So, like,
well, like,
it's not a sexual ritual.
No, but the thing is, like, we've already discussed that, like, they say that it's like a blood, like, they all drink each other's blood, kind of. So, like, we've already discussed that this can get you hecka horny. So, like, a lot of times with consenting adults, what happens when you're real turned on and in, like, you know, it can lead to things.
It can lead to sex.
Yeah. Who would have thought?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
he kind of teases her about her interest in it, and yeah, it's really when you're like, oh, I feel like this is a bit of foreshadowing. I feel like there's going to be a threesome.
Yeah. So there's not in book 3. You don't.
Is that a question?
Yeah, I'm asking.
Okay. Yeah, no, there isn't. Because people were pissed. Oh. Yeah. Because, like, it really does foreshadow that it's going to happen a lot, and then it doesn't, and that's the only thing I heard about the 3rd book was the backlash about this thing.
Oh.
So, interesting. Poppy tells him, like, she knows he needs to feed, and he isn't going to from anyone else, so, she asks him, like, what would happen if he doesn't, and he tells her, like, it's a violent bloodlust that not many come back from, and, like, it's basically a madness that you end up in. Like, if he went all the way, he was only part way to the end this morning. If he went all the way...
He ain't coming back.
He's not coming back. But she asks about his time with the Ascended, and he says, like, he always came back from it. Even though it's not something that people come back from. He always has, but he's never been the same. Like, every time it would you kind of feel like it would take a bit more of his humanity away, is kind of the way it's like. They kind of argue a bit over her being the one to feed him, and he doesn't want to, like, add that to her list of resentments against him, but she tells him, like, she cares about him, like, as a person type of thing. Like, she cares about him in general and wants to help him. And if he cares for her at all, he should want to keep her safe. So, like, that's why she wants to feed him. It's not something that she's actually going to not use against him, but, like, kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah. She's like, hey, if you don't feed for me, you're going to be in danger to me. So, like, if you want to keep me safe, drink me.
Drink me. He says he's unworthy of her, and he agrees. Kieran comes to supervise to make sure that Casteel drinks enough, and also to make sure that Poppy lives. And, like, this is another reason why I think the threesome is kind of, like,
this was
foreshadowing
hot.
for the threesome.
This was hot.
It's super sexy, and, like, it's super intimate, and Kieran is, like, behind Poppy to monitor her pulse, and Casteel's on her from the front, and you're like, whoa, are we gonna have... Are we gonna have a threesome right the fuck now? So she connects her gifts to Casteel, and his hunger and, like, concern are palpable, and he bites her, and apparently the first part of a bite is always a bit of pain, and it's, like, super overwhelming, but only for a little bit, and then it like turns pleasurable. So he takes some blood and then he stops, but, like, they all know it isn't enough, so he takes some more. And just like last time, Poppy is super turned on, and she's still connected to Casteel through her power, and she feels his arousal that way, and then also she can feel his dick pressing into her.
Woo!
And he ends up, like, pushing her back against Kieran and pins them both to the wall.
Yeah, so, like, Kieran is up against the wall, Poppy is up against Kieran, and then Casteel is up against her. It's like a hot sandwich.
It is a hot sandwich. And he pulls her leg up around his waist, and she's like, it's a different kind of hunger now, and Kieran's just there standing behind her, and it's like...
like Akko Taco.
I hope he's getting something out of it, because, like, if not, this is just sad. But she's, like, already super close to an orgasm. Like, she is there. Yeah. And Kieran tells him that that's enough. And
like, he just doesn't want to be around. He's like, no thanks, I'm done now. Let me out of here.
He's like, I don't think we'll get past this if you actually come. So there's no real, like, you know, in every vampire thing, like, they won't stop. There's not really
very much of that. Like, Casteel actually does stop, and he, like, licks the wound, and I kind of think that heals it. Is that a thing that happens? I don't know. Or is it just, like, licking the last remnants? I don't know.
I don't know.
It doesn't heal it completely, but does it, like, stop the blood?
Maybe.
Maybe. And then Casteel pulls Poppy towards him, and I guess
releases Kieran from the wall.
Yeah, I guess Kieran can leave now. They don't really talk about him leaving. They just get to sex.
Yeah.
Maybe I missed it, but oh god. She's still connected to him power-wise, and she can feel how horny he is too, and he asks her to let him take away the egg. And he says it isn't about him. He wants to show her gratitude, and like he like praises her while his hands roam all over his body, and like he's grinding against her ass while he fingers her, and they both end up coming. And he apologizes and says, like, that it has never happened to him, that he's just come in his pants. And you're like, why is that such a thing? I don't know. I hate that too.
I also don't like this whole, like, he's giving her a reward. Like, oh, you were a good girl. Here's your reward. An orgasm.
Although, in books where they're like, you're such a good girl, I'm like, yes, please. But
I would just be like, you want to reward me? How about go get me some food, bring me a good book, light the fire, leave me alone.
Yeah. But she's just so horny at the moment.
I guess,
she needs the release. And she probably doesn't know how to masturbate, I guess. Which doesn't make any sense, because she read that diary, so you'd think she does.
Yeah, I know, you have a point there.
Yeah. I guess.
I guess if I was super turned on, then yeah, I'd be like, yes, please.
Yeah. In bed later, Casteel's a bit vulnerable and asks if he can hold her. And I think he says that he knows they shouldn't, but he just wants to pretend again. And she lets him, and he's kind of surprised that she does. But it's kind of just a sweet moment where he's asking for something that he wants.
Yeah, he's
that
being
is actually
vulnerable.
Like, huge. Yeah. When they wake up, Casteel wants to take her on a field trip to see the real Spessa's End. But his condition is like he wants to continue pretending to just be Hawk and Poppy. And she agrees, and he tells her that Atlanteans seal deals with kisses. Which then he's like, it's a complete lie, but then he just kisses her, and it's kind of a cute moment. Like, but it does make me think of Supernatural. They go to the stables, and a Wolven Colton is there. And when he looks at Poppy, he feels a weird staticky sensation. And Poppy uses her powers to reach out, because she's just like, why is he being weird? But she just feels surprise and confusion off of him. Casteel introduces them, and they actually shake hands, and he feels actual static when they touch hands. And he says that she feels full of energy, and she's likely from a powerful line, according to him, like a powerful bloodline. She ends up getting her own horse to learn how to ride, and Casteel like talks her through how to do it. And he tells her that they came here a lot when they were younger, and he and Kieran realized it would be a good place to reclaim. So technically, that means that Spessa's End is Atlantean land. So they could get married. But that's just a little tidbit. They like come upon a training ring with women inside, and there's like a group of women who are unarmed, and then their men come rushing towards them, and they're all completely armed. And within seconds, the women, who are a smaller group, have all the men disarmed and like in a death shot.
Amazing.
It's not the right word. Yeah, it is. I love it.
Yeah.
Casteel says that these women are the kingdom's elite, and they're the guardians of the Atlantean armies, and they're the last of their bloodline, so they're a warrior bloodline. And guardians are always, like, women. It goes through the women's line in this bloodline. And they train all of Atlantean's armies.
Which is amazing.
And this is the last warrior bloodline that exists, except Poppy is likely from a warrior bloodline.
Right.
According to Casteel. Poppy kind of wonders, like, if she can exist, then maybe there are others that exist too. But Casteel kind of doubts it. He kind of thinks, like, between him and Malik, they've likely fed on basically all of the mortals around with Atlantean blood, which is just not great.
Yeah.
And this is where we get that, like, Ian was the last person to ascend, and before him it was years since the last ascension. So, like, I guess Malik could actually be dead, but we don't know yet. They end up going towards some houses, and there's, like, about 100 houses, basically, and each one has land for gardening, and they meet with people, and Casteel is, like, she can see him acting as a ruler now, and he knows people's names, and he cares about them, and, like, he just has a good relationship with people, which is nice. Many are obviously wary or cold towards Poppy, but she, like, stands by and just, as he's acting, like, basically like a prince, really. Yeah. Casteel then tells her he wants her to meet someone, and they go to a house near other houses that are currently being built, and Beckett is there, and Kieran comes out, and he kind of teases her about being embarrassed about this morning, and he tells her that it's, like, natural, I guess, to get horny after someone's feeding on you. And then he tells her next time for the feeding to be less intense, she could just offer her wrist instead of her neck. And you're like, why didn't we do that anyway? We know that she doesn't want this to get sexual. Why are we doing this?
Well, I guess no one told her she could do it that way.
I know, but why didn't Casteel say, hey, why don't we do it this way?
Because he wants the sex.
I know, but that's manipulative too.
Yeah, your point. Yeah, your point.
It's not just me that can't speak. Yeah. So she's annoyed about that, but, like, not too annoyed because she had a good orgasm.
Yeah.
A sassy woman shows up then, and she's a Wolven too, and it turns out she's Kieran's sister. Her name's Vanetta. And they shake hands, and Vanetta feels the staticky charge too, and Kieran says, like, he felt it before when he touched her, and Cass has felt it before. So that's interesting.
Lots of people feeling the static. She keeps rubbing, she's rubbing her feet on the carpet too much.
Probably. So they all go inside Vanetta's house and, like, have some sandwiches and chat a bit, and Vanetta asks to check if, like, the static thing will happen again, and, like, I guess they touch hands again, but it doesn't. But then they talk about her scent, because in the past, Kieran had said that she smelled like death, but Vanetta says she smells old, which are all, like, super good things to smell like.
You smell like death. No, you don't. You just smell old. What is that, like mothballs?
Yeah. Casteel says he doesn't smell it, but says that her blood tastes old. And they're kind of, like, trying to figure out what she is, maybe, but they get interrupted by shouts of alarm, and, like, they go outside, and Alistair is coming towards them holding a limp Beckett. And he says a piece of roof collapsed on him, and the healer's over in the training ring, so the healer's pretty far away. So Casteel sends someone to go get the healer, but he's in too much pain to, like, shift back to his human form, and if a Wolven doesn't shift back to their Wolven form and heals as a Wolven, then their bones won't set correctly, so they have to heal
as a human.
Yeah. But he's in too much pain, and he's too young to be able to shift back. Yeah. So Poppy tries to, like, use her gift to take away some of his pain so that he can shift back and heal right. So she goes to his back, and she starts to use her gift, but something different happens. And instead of taking away the pain, a muted glow starts in her hands. And Casteel's just kind of like, that's not normal. She's like, no, it's not. And she can feel his pain lessening, but says it's never happened like this before. And, like, both of her hands are glowing, and she's just concentrating on taking the pain away. And Casteel says it isn't just her hands that are glowing.
Yeah. Her whole body is glowing.
What?
She's one big glowy pants.
Glowworm.
Yeah. So she's all glowy. She did the job she needed to. Beckett manages to shift back into human form, and lo and behold, his legs aren't broken anymore.
What?
I know. Bum, bum, bum. So, like, the glowing fades, and Casteel tells Poppy, like, you healed his legs. And she's like, no, I didn't. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And they're like, Beckett, move your legs. And he starts moving his legs, and they're not broken. But, like, Casteel's like, you should probably go see the healer anyway. And the healer's name is Talia, which I love that name.
That's a nice one.
And, like, there's this, like, huge crowd of people around. I guess when somebody starts to glow, it attracts a crowd of people.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, like, she can feel everybody's emotions. Like, she feels shock, she feels awe, and then she also feels bitterness and fear. And she says, like, the fear bit is confusing. Because what she did was not scary. Like, it's not like she did something, like, terrible.
Yeah.
Casteel, like, calls her back. I'm calling it, like, calls her back to consciousness. Like, she isn't unconscious, but, like, she's, like, all up in the feelings and, like, focused on everybody's feelings and emotions. And I guess she's, like, sort of in a trance or, like, in a weird, like, out of it state. You know, when you're staring off into nothing and you can't hear what someone's saying to you right next to you. She's like that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, like, Venetta knows exactly, like, oh, you're an empath. And have we talked about empaths before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it was brought up before, because they talked about soul leaders.
Right. So, Venetta's like, yeah, you're totally an empath. And, like, they're like, well, yeah, that's sort of the theory we already had. But apparently, like, so empaths could also heal. And maybe they're like, she's like, but I've never been able to do that before. That's never happened before. I don't understand. So they're thinking maybe she's getting closer to the culling, or maybe the fact that she's on Atlantean soil, or maybe just because Casteel has given her so much of his blood. Like, all of that could be impacting her powers and making her glow.
Yeah.
So, like, they're walking away now. Like, they're not, they're leaving. And she tells him that, like, people were afraid of her in the crowd. And she's worried that they think she's a soul leader. And she's also worried that Casteel thinks she is too. But, like, she's also, like, she has no clue how she healed Beckett. But, like, she also said that the healing was different this time. Normally, for her to, like, normally when she takes away someone's pain, she pushes one of her happy memories into them. But she said that she didn't have to think of that this time. Like, she literally just had to touch him and have the intent of taking his pain away, and it worked. And Casteel sort of says, like, maybe you should hold off from using your abilities in front of a crowd until they know more about what's happening to her. And she's like, she's sort of, like, upset about that. Like, why, if someone's hurt, I want to be able to help. And
yeah, she's not just gonna let someone die because he's like, don't use your powers in front of people.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem logical.
Yeah. But, like, he's saying, like, he wants to be able to control the narrative. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so, like, some Atlanteans won't understand her powers. So instead of doing all this magic in front of all these groups of people and then letting rumors spread, they want to get in front of it and, like, you know, maybe release a statement or, like, you know, come out with what she is before it travels through word of mouth. Right? And they need to be specific.
I get it.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, you can't really ask her not to use her powers.
Yeah. So he tells her, like, how amazing she is, and, like, he's saying she's amazing, but he really sounds angry, and so she asks if he's hungry again, and I'm like, lady, it's been half a day. He's not hungry.
He hasn't even been injured.
Injured.
Anyway, so she's like, oh, are you hungry again? But he says, not for blood. And then he gets, like, really, like, up in her personal space. Like, he's in her hula hoop. And, like, he's really close to kissing. He's really close to kissing her, but she, like, pushes him away. And he asks her to, like, look into his emotions and, like, feel what he feels. But she doesn't want to. She doesn't want to admit, like, you know, she doesn't want to see his feelings right now. And he thinks it's because she's afraid of what he feels. And he says what he feels is he wants to rip her pants off and fuck her so hard she'll feel it for days.
Yeah.
So
not angry.
No.
Which is just funny. You'd think that she'd have a better grasp on emotions, but, like, clearly his anger and his, like when she's angry, he finds it super hot. So, like, clearly he has something with, like, he has, like, a kink.
Yeah.
An anger kink.
I'm okay with it. So she's sort of, like, speechless at that because, I mean, someone says that, like, I don't know, I guess, what do you say?
Yeah.
So he just, like, takes her to the horse, and they start the ride back to, I don't know, the castle, the keep, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
While they're on the horse, though, he wants to talk about their marriage, and he says he wants them to marry. He wants to get married while they are there in Spessa's End, so his parents can't stop them, essentially.
Yeah.
And he says, like, they really only need a couple of things. They need wedding bands, and they need the head of a bloodline to officiate. And luckily, thank goodness, Kieran's father, Jasper, will be arriving tomorrow, and he's the head of the Wolfen bloodline, so he can do it. Good, yeah.
Convenient.
Very convenient.
Perfect.
Also, having Jesper last month in Crooked Kingdom to now having Jasper this month is so hard.
I know. And even when we were doing Crooked Kingdom, I was like, I kept saying Jasper and then being like, shit, no. And now I'm like, Jesper, and I'm like, shit, no.
Yeah. So he says that they'll get his Kieran's father, Jasper, to marry them, and then they will travel to his parents in Atlantia because she will need to be recognized and crowned as princess. So she's obviously nervous that his parents won't believe the marriage is genuine, but Casteel's like, we'll convince my parents. But she can sort of tell he's obviously a bit more worried than he's letting on. But, yeah.
Sure.
But she does agree to marry in Spessa's End regardless. She's like, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
I guess they get back to the keep, and Alistair is there, and they tell him, like, you know, we're gonna get married here. He doesn't think it's a good idea.
Of course.
And I guess since the healing, her powers have grown. Like, she doesn't need to open herself up to, like, sense people's emotions. Like, she can sort of just look and know. So, like, she knows that he doesn't think it's a good idea. He doesn't like it. And Alistair is trying to convince Poppy, like, just wait until you meet the king and queen. But she says, like, a really great line, and I really liked it. She says, like, of course she would have rather been courted properly, but that isn't their reality. And the reality is she would rather marry before learning all the ways Casteel's parents object. And Alistair's like, oh, but you don't know that they'll object. She's like, yes, I do, because the only people who have been nice to her since they got to Spessa's End have been the Wolden. So she expects the king and queen to agree with the rest of the Atlanteans who have treated her like absolute shit.
Yes.
So, and I just really like that. Like, I guess Alistair was trying to get her on his side. And I just really like that she's like, no, dude, like, back the fuck off.
Yeah. And, like, it's true. Everyone has been shitty to her. Yeah. Of course she's not gonna, like, she makes a really good point.
Yeah. So, Casteel, like, agrees that his parents will probably be shocked and a bit annoyed about the fact that they're, like, missing the wedding, which, like, valid. Yeah. But he says that they will, like, they'll come to know Poppy, they'll get to know her, and love her as fiercely as he does.
Which is sweet, but I'm like, all these people being like, once you get to know her, you'll love her. Like, this is a bit much.
Well, yeah, and we said it, I think, last week, that, like, no, not everybody can get to know her in order to love her. You just gotta take it on faith that she's not a jackass.
Yeah, which, like, yes, his parents can obviously get to know her. Fine, yeah. I'll give them that.
Anyway, so Alistair leaves, and they chat a bit about Poppy's new powers. And then she tells him, like, he seems really convincing when he talks to other people about his feelings for her.
Imagine.
So he asks if he can take her somewhere. So they get on Seti, that's the horse's name. And he first takes her to a poppy field, which I don't understand. Like,
her name's Poppy,
I guess, but he's like, hey, look at this field of poppies. And she's like, pretty.
Let's have an opium conversation.
Well, but it's true. But yes, then they literally do have an opium conversation, because he's like, yeah, we grow it for medical reasons. And she's like, aren't you afraid people are going to, like, abuse it? And he's like, yeah, but we've got guards everywhere, so it's fine. It's so and then she's like, okay, cool. And he's like, okay, let's move on. So, like, what was the point of that?
Yeah, it's almost like, it seems like it's a name thing, but then why?
Is it gonna show up in, like, 3 books' time?
Oh, maybe if they ever I guess they'll eventually end up back. Mm-hmm. Not to spoil it, but
who knows?
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway.
I forget how this book ends anyway, so.
So then he takes her to a cavern. So, like, he's mentioned before, I think it was in the last book, about how he used to, like, run around all these caves with his brother. So this is...
And his best friend.
Yeah, one said cave.
Which we assumed it was Kieran, or I did at one point.
But now I think it's Shay.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. But I think they were all there, but I think, like, he just didn't mention Kieran. No. It's just a given. We're stuck together, I guess.
So he says that they run for miles, and they go all the way under the Skotos Mountains. But they've never been able to find the path through the Skotos Mountains. Yes. This does have validity, I believe. Mm-hmm. Okay. Like, this comes up.
I don't know, but... Yeah, I kind of assumed it did, but I didn't know how. Still don't.
Anyway, so inside this cave that he brings her to is a hot spring. And he leads her to them, and she's like hot, like, turned on as fuck. And, like, I don't really understand how it happened, but she is there.
He took off his clothes, and she got there.
No, but his clothes aren't off yet.
Oh, really?
No. So, like, any little, like, touch that he gives her, like, sets her, like, shivering. And, like, you know how apparently, and I say this with air quotations, when a woman gets turned on, her nipples get hard, like, immediately. Like, I'm not saying
Has nothing to do with the coldness ever.
So apparently...
It's always turned on.
So apparently that happens. And, like, he tells her they have about an hour before they have to get back to their room or whatever. So they can just, quote-unquote, be... So they have, like, an hour off, let's say. And she loves that he's calling them we, like, they're... Like, he's speaking of them like they're one unit, and she really likes it. But, like, she finds him really contradictory. And, like, same girl. Because she's like, he's considerate, but then he's demanding. He's teasing, and then he's cold. He's violent, and then he's loving. And, like, he is! Yeah.
He's literally like, I hate the Ascendants and everyone that has anything to do with them, including you.
But I love you!
But you're hot, and...
I like your vagina.
Right?
Anyway, so he goes to check on the horse, like, as an excuse, just so that she can take her clothes off in peace. And then she gets in the hot spring. And then he comes back and undresses. And she just stares at him. Like, just watches him with, like, a wide eyes.
Unabashedly. And you're just like, if this was opposite, you would be so awkward and embarrassed. But you're just staring.
And he's, like, staring right back at her, like, what? Like, it's like a striptease, but... Anyway. So, when he gets in, she tells him that she wishes that everyone who inflicted pain on him, like, she wishes they could feel pain. And she says, like, even the queen, which is hard for her to admit, because she remembers the queen as being someone really loving and caring for her. And, you know, she can't, like, it's hard for her to realize that the same queen then inflicted pain on him, but she's turning it all around now. Mm-hmm. So, like, she obviously wants him. So he comes to her and has an idea, and he starts to touch her. And he tells her, this is new information, that bites become erogenous zones until they're healed.
Yes. I think we mentioned it last week, but we didn't know it.
I mentioned it because I had read it, but this is where we actually find the information. So, essentially, like, it's a hot zone. It'll make her hella horny just playing with it. So, he starts to, like, suck on her bite mark on her neck, and she's, like, loving her life. And he tells her that she tastes old and powerful. Like, what is this? Like, who is she?
What does moonlight taste like?
I don't know. Maybe a little spicy?
Spicy?
Anyway, so his idea, maybe they can pretend again. And, like, he's like, if you want, we can just pretend that this is a physical reaction. Like, we can pretend that, like, you don't actually want me. We can just pretend. And she responds, like, it's actually the conversation, like, gets a little weird. She says she doesn't want to pretend anymore. Like, she likes it when they pretend to be Hawk and Poppy, but, like, she doesn't want to pretend anymore. She's like, I have a condition. Like, let's not pretend at all. I'm Poppy, you're Casteel, and, like, this is real. Mm-hmm. And I guess acknowledging that it's real in her mind and in his mind. So, like, for her to acknowledge that it's all real, she's acknowledging everything he's done to her in a bad way and sort of forgiving him for it anyway.
Yeah. Which I think it's like, healthy and helpful for the guilt that she sometimes feels afterwards.
Yes.
Like, I think they need this.
Anyway, so she moves to him and kisses him, and he's excited, but also in awe. Because he's always in awe of her. He can't believe that she wants him, like, even knowing everything about him.
He doesn't deserve her.
He also...
It's his thing, too.
Yeah. He tells her, like, he wishes that they had time, because he would love to take his time with her, licking every inch of her body. It just reminds me of, was it AKOFAF when Reese offers to, like,
oh my God.
lick all the dirt off her?
So gross.
Also, he wants to watch as she gives him a blowjob. And
Which she's never
I know,
done
and
before.
she
Sorry, I didn't mean to take your
but
words.
that's literally what she says, oh, but I don't know how to do that. And he's like, you couldn't do it. I'm like, I mean, you could.
Just bite it.
You could.
Just bite it.
Too much teeth.
Bite it off.
Anyway, so he tells her to hold on because he's going to fuck her exactly like he said earlier. And he does. In the water, just right there in the hot spring.
How are you keeping her in one spot? She's like thrusting and they're like zooming across the water.
I mean, I'm assuming they're up against the ledge.
No. No, they're zooming in the water.
Anyway, they cuddle for a little bit afterwards until they hear somebody outside the cave. It's Kieran! Casteel goes out to talk to him, and, like, turns out Kieran figured that they would be there, so he brought them a change of clothes and towels, which is...
He's so considerate.
Like, especially...
Good person.
If Casteel knew he was bringing her there, why didn't he pack this shit?
True. He probably wanted to lick her dry. Sorry.
Anyway, Casteel uses the towel and dries Poppy off. He first asks if he is allowed consent. Way to go.
Key. Consent is key.
And then he obviously...
Which is so weird. Fuck.
I know.
I can't get into it, I guess.
So he uses the excuse to, like, touch her boobs to dry her off, and then he touches her vagine to dry her off, and obviously she gets all hot and heavy again. And then he says a few things that make her sad. So, one, he tells her not to worry, that what they did will stay in the cave. And then she asks him about, like, pregnancy prevention, and he tells her that he's still covered. So he's the one taking the tonic, which, like, yay for dudes. Finally.
Yeah, I do love that trope. All fantasy books written by women, the man takes the...
I know. Yes, thank God.
And I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
It's all magic, too, so it probably doesn't affect their moods like it does ours, but still.
And then he also says, like, don't worry, I wouldn't risk a pregnancy. And that makes her sad. Not because she wants to be pregnant, but what she thinks when he says that.
Means it's gonna end.
Well, yeah, he's like, oh, she thinks that what he's really saying here is that he wouldn't risk a child between them.
Yeah.
Which is valid. Like, if someone said that, I would also be sad like that.
Yeah, I guess. But I'd also be like, I am 18. Well, yeah. I don't want to get pregnant. We're not even married. Yes. We can't get pregnant yet. But yeah, she likes reading into, not actually reading into things, but she really likes reading into things that it's bad.
So, after, like, he sort of, I don't want to say breaks her heart, but, like, after he sort of is, like, implies that he doesn't want to have children with her.
Oh, yeah.
They go back, I guess, to the keep place or whatever. And, like, obviously news of how she healed Beckett spread around. So they were having dinner, like, a lot of people were staring at her. Beckett comes out and, like, he's walking. He's got a little bit of a limp, but he's mostly fine. And he introduces himself to Poppy and, like, thanks her, essentially. But she feels fear from him, which I don't understand. From him, like, I sort of get it from other people, but you would think that considering she saved him, he would be like, like...
Yeah.
Worship.
Exactly that. I know, it seems kind of weird to me that, and, like, I haven't read this book in a while, and I've not done it yet, but I can't really remember if it gets explained why it's fear, because, like,
I don't think the healing process is painful or anything. I don't think it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
Yeah. Anyway. So it's just odd. And then she also feels fear from other people in the room, obviously. And Alistair is sitting there, and he tries to cheer her up, but he, like, low-key does the absolute worst job possible doing it.
Of course.
Like, he cannot cheer someone up to save their lives. His ways of cheering her up, he says, like, don't let their feelings get to you. You are the neck that turns the head of the kingdom. Because she supports Casteel, and Casteel is the head of the kingdom. So, like, he's like, you know, you have to be strong. You're the neck, the strong part. You're the support. Ugh. Like, misogynistic much?
Yeah. So dumb.
And then he's also like, oh, you know, like, don't mind them. His engagement to you is so unexpected.
Yeah.
And it's just like, dude, shut up. Take a hint. Just shut up. But no, he continues. And then he says something that really gets... I'm not going to say gets him into trouble, because it doesn't really get him into trouble. But he says something that gets Casteel into trouble.
Yeah. It's true.
So, like, he was like, oh, you know, his engagement to you is completely unexpected, considering that everybody was expecting someone else to be his princess. And she sort of, I think, initially thinks that he's talking about Shay.
Of course. That's immediately what you'd think.
Yeah. But then he continues and says that, actually, he's betrothed. He is expected to marry somebody else when he gets home.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's not good.
Alistair is just an ass.
Yeah. Well, he started this conversation so he could tell her this, because he knows that she doesn't know.
And it's really dumb. Like, you can tell that this is him this is like manipulation 101. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, he's dropping this into the conversation, like, just sort of nonchalantly. Like, after all, he never expected, no one expected him to marry you. They expected him to marry Marie over there. Her name's not Marie. Yeah. We don't, like, but.
We don't know who it is yet.
Yeah. But, you know. Yeah. It's more like, it's just so, I hate it so much.
Yeah.
Anyway. So. Casteel sort of like, he obviously can't be right next to them, but he does manage to overhear this part of the conversation, and he butts in. And he's sort of like, Alistair, like, you had no right to tell her any of this, and he was like, you should have told Poppy that you were promised to someone else.
Like, he keeps bringing up things. It's like he doesn't remember that Poppy is 18 and Casteel is however old. Like, he has a large history. It's not just, like, he's like, oh, I can't believe he didn't tell you about Spessa's end. Oh, I can't believe he didn't tell you about this. It's like, there's a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's too much to tell one person.
Yeah. Like, but I would be pissed off if I were her too, because I wouldn't want to hear this from, like, some middle-aged man. I would want to hear it from the guy I have feelings for.
No, and it is such a trope that is, like, remember that book that we read last October?
Which one? The witch? The
witch one, yeah.
Okay.
And she was like, he is engaged to someone.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
But, like, he was, like, going back to stop the engagement because it was his father's idea, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
It's like, I don't know. The
XX!
The XX, yes. I just kind of hate the trope, and I hate how angry it, like, makes the main characters. This one's not so bad because they literally talk it out and everything's fine.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know. I find that it's always such a big deal, and you're like, why didn't you tell me? Like, yes, you would be like that in real life. I don't think I would lose my shit in front of a room full of people that hate me, though. Maybe I would. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't even care anymore, because they all hate me anyway.
Yeah. Well, so this is the thing. So, like, all Poppy can think of at this moment are, like, all the times that she trusted him and, like, wanted him sexually, and, like, all the times they were, like, physical together, and, like, all this time he was supposed to marry someone else. And she sort of feels betrayed, I guess.
Yes.
And, like,
if he actually were engaged, 100% valid, that would be so bad. Obviously.
Yeah. And yeah, like, I guess you would feel like sort of not that you were cheated on, but, like, she kind of, if, you know, he is engaged to be married to someone else, he's kind of helping him cheat a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it.
Yeah, that would be a surprise for sure.
Anyway, so Casteel is, like, furious that Alistair told her. And, like, voices how furious he is. He's like, you should not have done that. That was not your place. Like,
oh, 100%.
And Alistair's like, well, she needed to know. And he's like, no. Like, he said, this is something my father planned. I never agreed to it. But, like, Alistair's like, but it's been in the works for decades. And Casteel's sort of like, yeah, and I still haven't agreed to it. I'm sure my father realizes that by now. So, like, him just yelling at Alistair for that makes Poppy slightly less angry.
Yeah,
because she's like,
which is fair.
Right.
Oh, there's more to this.
Yeah, right? Like, oh my god, what? There's more to this story? Anyway. So, all of a sudden, like, Kieran and Jasper show up. And I love this bit. Casteel tells Alistair that this tactic is weak of him. So, like, he obviously sees that he's trying to manipulate her into not going through with the marriage.
Yeah.
And Alistair then reminds him that he may not have agreed, but everyone, including Gianna, thought that you would wed, and it would have strengthened the ties between the Atlanteans and the Wolven, which I guess is important.
Yes.
But then Jasper pipes up and tells Alistair, like, you don't speak for the Wolven, because it's Jasper that is the leader, I guess the elder spokesman for the Wolven. So, like, he actually is the one that gets to speak for the Wolven, not Alistair. Alistair has a serious case of, like, power trip.
Yeah.
Like, he acts way more powerful than he is.
Yeah, and, like, he has powerful positions, I guess, and he's respected and shit, but, like, there was that power struggle with him and Casteel. Like, he really needs to, like, learn his place.
Yeah.
In this whole thing.
Anyway, so, like, an argument sort of breaks out, and some other Atlanteans, like, join in on this argument, and then some, like, rando, like, calls Poppy out for being being one of the Ascended. Even though she's not an Ascended, he calls her out for being one of them. Mm-hmm. And then she does something great. She calls him out right back, because she noticed him staring at her with hate.
Mm-hmm.
And then he, like, calls her out, and she's like, yeah, she was like, yeah, like, and she sort of, like, defends herself, and she actually says to everybody, she was like, everyone here who, like, wants to look at me like that, but no one will say anything to my face, like, you know, I just really like that she did that.
Yeah.
And then she said her cage was so pretty. Like, she said they had made a cage for her so pretty, she didn't even know she was in one. And essentially said that, like, it was tiny, and she has no loyalty to them. And she said, like, I know that many of you would rather send me back to Solace in pieces. And Casteel then, like, pipes in that, like, he did initially plan to use her and ransom her, but then he fell in love with her instead. And I think is this, like, the first time we're getting the L word?
I think so, yeah.
So that was nice. He said that in front of everybody. But
she still doesn't think it's real.
Yeah. But then she tells her story about the Ascended and how they wouldn't let her do anything, and that Casteel was the first thing she chose for herself. And she essentially said she wouldn't be sitting here dealing with everybody staring at her with hate, and willing to go to a kingdom that's going to do the same thing if their engagement wasn't real. And people sort of like are like, huh, yeah, okay, we buy that.
Yeah,
and like,
which is just funny because their engagement isn't real.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that sort of like makes like it, everything settles down then, and they just have dinner. But like everybody else is still looking at her with hate, and I don't understand why.
Yeah. This
is, to me, the most weird place in the book. Like, why bother having that whole spiel? And I'm talking, like, I really condensed that. That was, like, 2 to 3 pages of dialogue and her, like, dealing with the emotions of people staring at her. Yeah. Why bother having her say all of that if nobody was convinced?
Yeah. Like, they're convinced that they're in love, but they're not convinced that they don't hate her.
Which is stupid. Like, if somebody tells you, oh, actually, I was, like, mentally and physically abused for years because of them, I really don't like them. Surely, if you were like, I don't like you, you're friends with that person, and then they were like, oh, I'm not actually friends with that person, surely you wouldn't be like, well, still hate you anyway.
Yeah. Like, is it a plot point that they have to hate her for some other... I just don't understand why so much hate.
I feel like the only reason why, plot point-wise, they would continue to hate her is so that she continues to have, like, death, like people coming at her to try and kill her.
True. Yeah.
But, like, just, like, I don't know what else she can do to prove herself. Like, to me, these people are just, like, flawed.
Yeah.
Like, shouldn't there be, like, she said, and there was no other emotion. People were just staring at her with hate. Like, shouldn't there be a smattering, like, some people, like, I would find that believable if, like, maybe half the people still looked at her at hate, not convinced, because, you know, bigots exist, and no matter what you say, you can't convince everybody. But you would think that there would still be, like, she would sense a little bit of another emotion. Like, you know, I looked around, and while I still got a ton of hate in the room, there were also, like, you know, there was empathy coming out of some people's eyes that wasn't there before. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like that should have been something, and it wasn't.
Yeah, I agree. It's just really, the hate is too much. Mm-hmm. I don't really get it.
Yeah. So, obviously, she's sick of sitting there and feeling all the hate on her, like, so she leaves, and she just stands up and leaves. She's like, I'm not even gonna bother excusing myself. To hell with, like, politeness and decorum. I'm just out.
Yeah.
And Delano and Niall are out there, and they were like, we did not want to go in there. He was like, the tension was way too much. She was like, that's a great idea. And so then she drinks some of their whiskey. And they're just all, like, drinking out there for a few minutes by themselves, which is cute. But Casteel then follows her out, and he apologizes for the way his people have made her feel. And it's just like, dude, like, you're not responsible for them.
Yeah. At
all. I just, like... Anyway.
Also, that's not the apology she wants right now.
No. But, like, she sort of says, like, I don't want to hear you apologize. Like, I did expect this. Like, we knew this was going to happen. And she just doesn't really want to hear about an apology right now. So, Kieran comes out and tells Casteel that Jasper wants to chat about something. So Kieran walks Poppy back to her room. So did we must have said already that Jasper is Kieran's father.
Yes.
And he speaks for all the Wolven, like we just said. And normally he travels back and forth to Spessa's End. But his wife is having another baby soon. So he's spending more time in where the mother lives instead of doing a lot of traveling. But he's here now.
Yeah.
So I guess, like, I think he said, did he say he was the baby? Or, well, either him or Venetta is the baby.
I feel like Venetta was younger, but based on nothing.
But she's like 200 or 300 years old. Like, apparently his dad is like 800 years old and they're having another baby. And she's like, whoa, like 200 years between kids, that's a big leap.
Yeah.
But Kieran tells her that, like, Wolven take years and years to grow into adulthood. Like, could be 50 years. And he said, like, Beckett may look younger than you, but he's actually older than you. Like, he's immature for a Wolven.
Yeah.
Anyway. So that was a fun conversation that
just some info.
Yeah. Info dump.
Yeah.
So she goes into her room and she's checking out the clothes Venetta got for her. So Venetta, I guess, dropped some clothes at her room. And she goes to check the front door, I guess, just out of habit. And she realizes that the door to her bedroom is not locked. Like, she's not locked in the room. So she isn't a prisoner or a captive anymore. And, like, she has this, like, moment of, like, catharsis, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, she just, like, breaks down and cry. And she, like, cries forever. Because it's this, like, she realizes that, like, she's technically free. Like, she's not locked in anywhere. She could go out of the room and walk the town and be okay.
And, like, she would not get in trouble for it anymore.
Yeah.
She wouldn't get a beating for it, because that's what used to happen to her if she ever did anything wrong.
Mm-hmm. So she realizes she has, like, freedom. And she also thought that, like, standing up for herself in the room full of people was also another moment for her, like, that she wouldn't normally do. So she's finally, like, shedding all of her, like, maideny layers. I'll say.
Yeah. Maideny layers.
Maideny layers, yes.
Fair.
She's also, like, in this, like, moment of awakening, realizes that she's actually in love with Casteel, but she assumes that because he didn't tell her about Gianna, or the joining, or anything about Spessa's End, he obviously doesn't love her. And they obviously aren't heartmates.
Yeah. And it's obvious that this was Alistair's plan, or she wouldn't be thinking about everything Alistair said when she's thinking that.
Yep. So, anyway, she is really, like, weary and, like, tired. Like, you know how you get tired after a really, really big cry?
Yeah.
So, yeah, she just goes to sleep. But she does lock the door. So she wakes up to find Casteel in bed with her, and she's like, how did you get in? I locked the door. Like, obviously she didn't want him coming in.
Yeah.
But anyway, but it doesn't really matter. He's got a key.
He's also the highest ranked in there. He would break down the door if he had to.
So they, like, flirt a bunch and talk again about how she stabbed him in the heart and how he likes her violence.
And turns him on.
Yeah. She's trying really hard to be uninterested in it, but is finding it difficult.
Yeah, because she loves him.
Yes. So he, like, starts to feel her up, and I guess he wants to have sexy times. Because, you know, they had sex, like, in the springy cave.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing he assumes, like, hey, fair game.
Yeah.
Right? And then she, like, sort of pushes him off, and she's like, when we get back to Atlantia, there must be other beds you can visit, like Gianna's. It's like, could you be more transparent in your jealousy?
Yeah.
Could you? I don't know if she could.
I don't think so.
No. Ugh. Like, massive with the eye roll here. And he's sort of, like, shocked. In his mind, this is completely coming out of left field.
Which is dumb, too.
It's like, how is this not coming out of left field for you, sir?
You literally had the conversation 5 minutes ago.
Anyway, so, like, he then says that, like, yeah, maybe there was an expectation there, but he never agreed to it. But he also didn't want to outwardly say no and hurt the girl's feelings. Stupid.
So you're leading her on. So you're leading her on, thinking that she's going to be the next queen. Ugh. Like, this is a big deal.
Yeah. And then he says something even worse. He says he had forgotten all about it until Alistair brought it up.
That's so bad. That's so problematic.
What a sin for that poor girl.
Casteel's a fuckboy.
He is!
That is so bad.
Oh my god. I don't actually have much experience with that.
That's fair.
But I see them around, and I'm like, yep, I can tell.
Right?
Anyway, they have a fight now. And Poppy is, like, mad at him, obviously, because he doesn't tell her anything about himself.
Fair.
And he's mad at her that she doesn't have more faith in him, especially over the engagement thing. He's like, you honestly think I would have done all the stuff that you and I have done sexually, wink wink, if I was engaged.
That's all he cares about. That is all he cares about.
I mean, he's a male.
I know, but, like, it's wild. Just paralleling the fuckboy.
Yeah. Anyway, she asks, like, she brings up other stuff, like, why didn't he tell her about Spessa's end? Because he's the one who came up with the idea and colonized it, so it was important to him. Why didn't he tell her about it? Why didn't he tell her about the joining? Which, like, why is she still on about the joining? Like, let the joining go. Yeah. Because
there's gonna be a threesome.
One can only hope. I wonder if the 4th or 5th book has it in it.
It might. I really hope so.
And why can't he talk about her? Quote unquote. AKA the love that he had lost. Mm-hmm. And, like, why is he in her room right now?
It's also his room.
Why is she in his room right now? Like, why is he insistent on sharing a room?
Yeah.
He then says, like, he wants to know if what she said at dinner was true. Like, the whole thing about how she wouldn't be there if it wasn't real because he's the first thing she's chosen for herself, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't really talk. She doesn't really say anything. Because for her, it's about... She doesn't want to be vulnerable and tell him her feelings, because in her mind, he doesn't reciprocate them. But then, it's the same with him. He's not going to open up and share important things about his culture if he thinks she's got one foot out the door.
Yeah.
So. And do you know what, though? Like, if he has feelings for her, I feel like opening up and sharing those things is probably, like, you love her, obviously you want to be with her. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you want to share things with her to endear yourself to her? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, opening up who you are and talking to her about stuff. Like, that's what's gonna make her have feelings for you.
Yeah, but he just thinks that he's so unworthy of her that it's impossible.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he sort of says, like, whenever he asks her something, she never gives him an answer. So, like, he knows that she's already, like, one step out the door. So why tell her anything? I mean, I don't agree.
Yeah.
So she asks, like, what do you want from me? And his response is,
good.
Of course it is. That's always the response.
Yeah. But it's kind of admitting, I guess if Poppy were smarter. She has no experience and doesn't understand.
Anyway. So, he tells her that, like, he wasn't expecting her. And, like, valid. He was hoping to kidnap, like, I would say he was probably hoping to kidnap a stuck-up bitch and ransom her for his brother.
Yeah.
But he says that, like, the way he feels when he's with her, he doesn't think about anything. He doesn't think about Malik. He doesn't think about his kingdom. He doesn't think about anything. Like, she just helps him forget. Which I also don't know if that's quite healthy.
Mm-hmm. When you were just saying that, I was like, that's not healthy, man. Like, you shouldn't just forget all your responsibilities because you're with someone you love. No. That's not what we strive for.
No, like, you want someone, obviously, that helps, like, relieve your burden so it doesn't feel so heavy.
Yes.
But, like, shouldn't make you forget about all of the responsibilities you have. It's like me saying to my husband, oh, I forget about our children. I forget about my job when I'm with you.
Yeah.
That's weird.
It is weird.
Like, I don't say that, by the way. I never forget about my children or my job. But yeah, so he says that she helps him. And, like, I'm sort of upset. Like, I wish they would hash everything out now. But somebody knocks on the door. And he's like, whoever you are, if you want to keep your legs, you'll walk away.
Which I kind of love. I do love that.
Yeah, me too. But then he's like, I wish I could, but this is very important. And then he opens the door and he tells them that the sky is on fire.
Which, I kind of thought it was going to be like an omen from a god or something. You don't just say the sky's on fire because there's fire in the distance.
But, like, also...
That's not the sky.
No, you would think, like, they are an advanced enough society to be able to tell when there is a fire going on the ground and the smoke is in the sky. Like, that's...
If the sky is on fire, I expect to go outside and the sky above me to be on fire.
Yes, or, like, the color of fire.
Yeah.
But
it's not.
No. But I think that it must have been done for, like, shock value. Because, like, what else are you going to be able to say to them to get them to forget about what they're talking about and go deal with it?
Yeah.
So they obviously do. They're like, our conversation isn't over, but let's go deal with this first. So they head up onto the rise, which is, like, if you've forgotten, it's like a wall that I think goes around the whole city, like the whole town.
I think so.
Like a big stone wall. So they climb up onto that to look out. And the sky isn't burning. There's just a huge fire close by. So they send Delano with some other guy, Dante. The guy, Dante, was the one who, like, called Poppy out during dinner.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, sent the two. I know, right? What a shock. They picked him. So obviously Delano. Oh my God, words.
It's a day of it.
So Delano goes as a Wolven, but like, so Dante is a human. So like,
oh, is he?
Yeah, he's not a Wolven. So Delano is like running along on his four little paws.
Is Dante on his back?
But like, I don't understand how else Dante would have been able to keep up. Because Wolven are
Atlanteans are fast.
No, but Wolven are faster.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
I guess he slowed down for him.
Yeah, so they send those two guys to Pompeii to see what's going on. So if you remember, Pompeii is it's like the next village over, the one that is just graves. because the Ascended just literally murdered everybody where they were. And so then Casteel and crew buried everyone. So that's all it is. So they're sending them there. So they wait up on the rise like all night for Delano and Dante to return. Jasper, like while they're all waiting, formally introduces himself to Poppy, and they chat for a little bit. And she asks him, like, you speak for all the Wolven. Like, did you expect Casteel to marry someone else?
Yeah.
And
which I'm like super impressed that she had the balls to ask. Right? I would have been like, let's not talk about this conversation.
But at the same time, though, like, they are to be married. I feel like, you know, it would make sense for her to ask.
Yeah. And, like, she's not one to not ask something if she has a question, so.
Yeah. So he says, like, no, I don't expect him to marry someone else. And he also says that, like, a marriage between a Wolven and an Atlantean would actually do very little to ease, like, the discord that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, you know, the king will figure something else out. But obviously somebody has been feeding him ideas. Who do we think that is?
I don't know.
Alistair the jackass.
Fair.
Better one. Alistair the asshole.
Ah, alliteration.
Yes. Who doesn't love a bit of alliteration?
Love it.
So obviously, like, Alistair, he is, like, I don't know what you would call him, like, first, royal advisor to the king and queen or whatever.
Yeah.
So, like, obviously he's feeding them ideas.
Yeah.
So, then he thanks her for Beckett and says, you know, like, thanks for doing that, for healing him. Like, that means a lot. And that leads into, like, a conversation actually about her powers. And Jasper says, like, because she's like, do you think I smell like death too? Because obviously she's kept hold of the fact that Kieran thinks she smells like death.
Fair.
Right? If someone said that to me, I'd be like, thank you, I guess. Like, I'd be offended.
Yeah.
So, like, he says, he doesn't think she smells like death. But he does think she smells different. But somehow familiar. But he can't place the smell. Like, it's familiar, but he can't remember it. And I want to know what it is so bad.
Yeah. What does all of this mean? Tell me.
Yeah. He also says, like, he actually does not think that she's an empath.
Which is the first time we've heard this.
Yes.
Everybody's like, yeah, she must be an empath.
Yeah.
Cool.
Soul leader. But he doesn't think so, because empaths could not heal, and they did not glow.
Interesting.
Those seem to be two key powers she's developing.
Yeah. Which are new, but, like, I wonder if he has an idea. Like, I wonder if he has something in mind, if he knows something, and he's just not saying it. Or if he's like, doesn't seem like an empath to me. I don't know what you are, but, like, I kind of wonder.
It'd be nice. Like, he is one of the oldest, you know, like, he actually was alive pre-war, so he would probably have one of the better ideas.
Yeah. He's also nice. He's a nice man.
He's a nice man. I really like him.
I do too.
I like him more than Victor. I like him a million times more than Alistair.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So, Casteel comes over to them and cuddles with Poppy to keep her warm because it's cold out.
Yeah.
They talk more about, like, bloodlines, and he's, like, I guess she sort of says, like, Jasper doesn't think I'm an empath, and he's sort of like, I don't know what else it could be. Because, like, I don't know what else has that power of, like, that emotional reading thing.
Yeah.
And he says the only other option could be that both of her parents were part Atlantean, and maybe she's like a mix.
Yeah. Which, like, she was like, it's impossible for one of my parents to be part Atlantean. And now it's like, both of them might not be. Huh.
But what if you had two Atlanteans of different bloodlines mate, have a baby, and then that baby was a full-blooded Atlantean with two different bloodlines? Could maybe they have made Poppy?
Yeah.
Right? And still have one of the parents be mortal or be not Atlantean or whatever.
Yeah.
It would just mean she was like a quarter of each power instead of half of one power.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
Math!
Yeah. Oof.
I got it. I'm not the worst.
You did.
But you know what I mean? So, like, maybe that, like, instead of automatically thinking, well, one of each of your parents must have both been Atlantean. I mean,
yeah.
genetics.
But then she would have been a full Atlantean then.
Poppy.
Is it possible that she is?
I don't know.
Because it really seems like they're telling us that she's mortal. But, like, I guess in another book they could just be like,
Psych.
JK, she was never mortal.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, so after that chat, she just sort of, she doesn't understand how the leader of the Wolven does not expect Casteel to marry some, like, this Gianna missus.
A Wolven.
But other people do. She was like, if the leader of the species doesn't expect him to marry a Wolven, then why does everybody else? Why do other Wolven expect it? Yeah. And in my head, I'm just, like, she doesn't say that out loud. She's just thinking in her head, but I just want to say to her, like, I guess, like, people have their own minds?
Yeah.
People can think for themselves?
Can they? Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. But the way that Alistair said it all was obviously manipulative to be like, everybody expected this. Yeah. And then to be like, it's a complete lie.
Well, considering, like, Alistair is the only Wolven she's talked to that expected it. Yeah. Like, none of the other Wolven have been, like, if anything, the Wolven have been the ones that have been nice to her.
Yeah. She says that.
Yeah. So, like, I don't understand where she's getting this, like, oh, all the other Wolven expect him to marry someone. I'm like, how many have you met? How many of them
one person
have expected it? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so Casteel then drops a bomb that he thinks Alistair, like, suggested the whole thing to his dad because Gianna is actually his great niece.
So, like, they kind of get into this because Casteel's like, it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
But it's literally, like, his ex would be this woman's aunt. Is that what we're saying? Yeah.
Shay, yes, would be this girl's aunt.
That is not cool.
Nope. But
don't like that.
But, like, also, it shows so much more of Alistair's character because it's like, he is willing first to have his daughter marry into it, but now that she's not around, okay, next suitable candidate in my family. Like, yes. He just wants to be related to royalty.
Yeah. And, like, not to get too much into spoilers, but clearly Casteel and Shay thought that they were in love. Like, that wasn't just...
It was not arranged, you're right.
No, it wasn't arranged like this one would be. But, like, figuring out this about Alistair, you're almost like, oh, maybe the apple doesn't fall too far.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's not a bad idea. And, like, how much of it was love on her side versus his side.
Versus her dad telling her to do something, potentially.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, so they don't even get a chance to really discuss that any further because at that moment, Delano returns and they obviously, like, race outside the rise to meet him. Mm-hmm. He's injured and he's alone Like, Dante is not there. Wonder where he is.
Whoop.
So Poppy heals him, and he's like, no, I'm fine. And she's like, no, you're not! Let me heal you! Actually, he can't talk because he's a woman, but
yeah,
he doesn't need her to heal him, but he does.
Yes.
Anyway, so she obviously glows again. Like, she's just like, what the fuck is happening? Like, I don't even care anymore. I'm just gonna glow people. And it's just funny because, like, remember when after she did Beckett's healing, Casteel's like, maybe you should keep this under wraps for a little bit so we can control the narrative.
But we love Delano, so she has to.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, so once he's, like, partially healed, like, she doesn't heal him all the way, but enough to let him shift back as a human. And they're like, what happened, Delano? And his words are, the Ascended are coming.
Dun,
dun, dun. It just reminds me of that quote during, is it Paul Revere said it during the War of Independence in the U.S., and he goes, the British are coming! The British are coming!
I have no idea. Sorry, dude.
Okay.
I don't know history.
Okay.
I've obviously heard the quote before, but I don't know who said it.
It just reminds me of that. It's like, the Ascended are coming!
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And then we stop.
There's a lot to wrap up next week.
Cliffhanger of the century.
Actually, doesn't this book have a cliffhanger?
This book does have a great cliffhanger.
Yeah. I don't remember it completely, but I do remember that there is one.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I'm excited for next week because we're going to wrap it up. We're going to have some spice. We're going to have some excitement.
Maybe a ceremony?
Who knows? I'm sure people will die.
Well, yeah. The Ascended are coming.
The Ascended are coming! The Ascended are coming!
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fine. So I guess we're gonna wrap it up for this week. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions for us, please reach out to us by email at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com, or on Instagram, Facebook, maybe Twitter, at coffeeandcoread.
Maybe not. So next week, like we said, we're finishing the book. So that is chapters 35 to 45. So make sure to follow along. And if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you find our content. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on the next page.